So today I will be talking to you about using CWL for bioinformatics workflows. And before we get into what is CWL and how it can be used, we need to take a step back and actually take a look at the frame of the problem that we are trying to solve with CWL. In a typical data analytics workflow, we look at four major steps: the data access, pre-processing, modeling, and finally the reporting and visualization / publication. But in the data analysis, we are looking at these two major parts: the pre-processing step, where we clean and curate data sets, and the modeling parts, where we do statistical data analysis. And now, drilling down into the realm of biomedical sciences, for example, when we have a whole genome sequencing data that we want to do some quality checking, mapping the sequences, and then aligning them to a reference genome in order to do some variant calling, we will go through the motions of this is through command line tools such as FastQC, BWA, and GATK. And after we have a subset of candidate variants we want to do some variant annotation on, we can, one would go about doing that using the gene and functions from and variant filtering from a set of common variants such as dbSNP. And then after all that is done, you use it as part of your downstream analysis and reporting and other use cases, and ultimately going into publication for that particular case. This is great, but one of the things that may get lost along the way is the nuances of that data analysis lifecycle and the workflows that the work processes that you went through in order to produce those results. For instance, in the case, as an example, in the case of GATK, perhaps your results were based off of one version of GATK and a newer version may not produce the exact same result. How does one go about capturing those specific sets of information and being able to transfer that, as well as making sure that the results that are published from these sets of analyses are thereby usable by others and actually reproducible, right? So this need for reproducibility can be addressed through workflows, which are generally speaking in the computational workflows, which are specifications which consume input data sets, generate intermediate files, and then produce results. And these reproducible workflows become very necessary because once you have a set of results and you want to be able to do further study or analysis to support those scientific claims, others want to be able to reproduce those claims, then having a reproducible workflow becomes very necessary. And furthermore, in cases such as compliance to regulatory agencies and answering questions about how those results were produced, as well as being able to track the provenance of that data. These are all things that become increasingly difficult to manage by custom or individually tailored solutions for single use cases. Once those workflows become more and more complex and have additional things that are required, then it becomes harder to maintain all of those things. And so in order to be able to confidently reproduce those results, you need a way to be able to retain the complete record of the computational analysis that you conducted. And this is where workflow languages come in to place. To be able to reproduce workflows, a workflow language can step in by providing by combining different bioinformatics tools to accomplish a specific data analysis tasks and solve those reproducibility issues. And these reproducibility issues can arise from diverse computing environments, as well as the complex software dependencies as mentioned in the previous example. And workflow languages are typically domain-specific languages. They can be in a number of different formats, as well have specific orchestrators and engines that support them. In the case of today, we'll be looking at specifically common workflow language. However, in that space of bioinformatic workflow languages, there exist some others such as SnakeMake, Nextflow, and WDL, which is a specification and not so much a domain-specific language. So why we're talking about common workflow language and why we are focusing on CWL specifically is because first, it is a vendor neutral and open standard. It is a community first project, and it's driven by an open community with transparent governance. It also, CWL also provides the ability to have interoperability and portability of workflows and bioinformatics analyses across multiple systems. We'll look at examples further on. Also allows you to increase the reusability and reproducibility and expandability of those workflows by capturing them in a common specific in a specification oriented in a specification that is oriented towards reproducibility. And also through the implementations of CWL and its and workflow tools and orchestrators, workflows can be expanded and parallelized and scaled without having to put in the effort of putting those features into the workflow in itself. So in many cases, which we can look at through the implementations further down, that there are ways that one can transfer from a single machine instance or from a developer environment such as a laptop to move that workflow into a cloud or high performance computing environment without having to do much in the way of retooling, or just changing the orchestration engine behind the implementation for that CWL instance. And there is also a growing community of tools, libraries, and editor plugins which support CWL as a specification and a standard. So as that community of tools grows, it makes it easier for others to adopt and use it in their tool set. So keeping on with the benefits, it is an open source standard. The code and repositories are all available. The structure of CWL allows it to be very hierarchical and modular. So that means workflow inheritance can be achieved through CWL, such as nested workflows or workflows which are combinations of multiple workflows, and it makes it really easy to create directed acyclic graphs from or to visualize directed acyclic graphs from these types of workflows. And as I mentioned before, the CWL is a specification and a standard, not necessarily a domain-specific language or one specific instance. So there are multiple vendors which are able to provide implementations of it, as well as, since it's an open standard, it's able to be integrated to multiple backends and systems, which allows that interoperability of that work of the specification, so that workflows can be used and results can be generated and reproduced from multiple varying compute environments. Along with the active community behind CWL, and the extensibility of the frame and the language itself, there's also both the ability to, as I mentioned, to the specification to be written in multiple ways. The way we'll look at today is in YAML, but it can also be written in JSON, as well as libraries which support CWL natively in Python and R. And here we are kind of drilling down more into that vendor agnostic aspect of it, which means that once one CWL workflow is written, so long as it's written in such a way that the dependencies are not esoteric or unique to just one type of environment, that workflow can be transported and reproduced in other environments. And these workflows can be shared with descriptions and builds for new workflows that can be based upon them in multiple types of computing environments. And we have some of the community implementations logos here, which include Apache Airflow, Galaxy, which supports CWL, Cromwell, Arvados, and Toil. And as part of that extensibility, how CWL can then be used in an application sense and also be used in multiple computing environments in order to reproduce results. We have two examples that I'll try to quickly highlight here. The first one being the integration of CWL with WES, which is the workflow execution service, another specification, and which has implementations based from in the open source community. However, what WES does is act as the intermediary, which interprets a workflow which is sent to the WES server, and then the WES server then converts that workflow into this specific sets of commands or instructions for that compute environment in order to run those steps of the workflow. So for example, an HPC environment, a WES API server could take the CWL that's being sent to it and then run the specific HPC specific loading commands in order to get the tool sets and the input data ready to be run in analysis. Another example that we have here is a project that I've had the pleasure of being able to work with and collaborate in, which is Crescent, the cancer RNA expression toolkit, and where CWL is used. And this is more of an interactive case where the front end allows the user to dynamically generate and send CWL in the form of a JSON to a compute environment, and then that compute environment produces a result in real time, provides the data visualization and analysis to the user, and then allows the user to then interact with the data and then capture all of that information in a defined CWL state for downstream and reuse and analysis. Okay, so that was a lot to actually talk about what CWL is without actually showing you it in person. So let's switch over and I can give you some quick demos of CWL. These are toy examples, just because getting into complex workflows would be time consuming and compute intensive. But in this case, we just want to give you an overview and a taste of what CWL can do. So the first example is a prototypical hello world, and I'm just going to be running this CWL workflow of hello world, which will run the echo command and then take the input from the user input, which is actually a string of hello world, and then produce the result back up to standard out. So I will just go here. And here I'm just going to, the CWL tool that I'm using here is an implementation of the CWL specification, but there are other ones. And in this case, it read the specification from the descriptive YAML for what this workflow should accomplish, in this case, to just produce the hello world output, and in standard out, it was there. So now looking at a more exciting workflow, we have let's see. Okay. So in this one, we're just going to do a file extraction. In this case, we're showing a little bit of additional features of the specification and the implementation in this case, or the standard in this case, through the ability to do file globbing and concatenation right within a workflow. So it allows us to do something like this, where here we're going to just create an input. We're going to create an input file. The workflow will receive that as an input, and then produce the corresponding output file into the same input file in this case. So what happened here was that we had hello world in a text. We actually went in, and then in the run script itself, we actually nullified it after we ran the input of hello world, which we can see here, which the file contents was null, and then the workflow ran in order to redirect and overwrite the existing file. So again, just to show how the format and structure of CWL, how it can be written, and now how it can be reused and run in multiple scenarios. We're going to skip the Docker example in the interest of time, and we can show something a little bit more closer to what a more exciting workflow that could be used in a more realistic setting. So in this case, we have this word count workflow where we're going to do a couple of different things here. Let me see if I can do this fast enough here. I'm going to just log into a public instance of min.io, and using the demo key here, we have an existing data bucket, which we are going to use as part of this workflow. Okay. So in this case, we just have a full text of the origin of species. That's just a text to be able to do word counting against. And what we're going to do is we're going to run this Python script as a workflow, which will be along with streaming the contents of that min.io object, and take in byte chunks of the file, and reproduce that file as a data object, which will then use to do a simple word count. Right. One of the nice things about this is in this workflow, we're actually through Python, through the min.io library rather, we're going to create an intermediary pickled file, which we can re-upload back to the min.io object, data object server, and then it will create that for further analysis for the future, and if we ever had to skip these steps. Okay, so I'm just going to go here. Oops, no. In this case, the run will hopefully. So it's going to take the input, which was the Python word count script, and then now in this case, we didn't actually direct the output to standard out, because if we were to think of this as an example of a remote system, we wouldn't have the ability to access standard out if it was running and remotely. So we wanted the results to go be redirected into a local input file here, which is this here. And then based on the word count, we were able to see the most common word is the from that full text, and as well as the sorted top 10 word count. The final one, it won't run just in the interest of time, but it is a good way to see what can be done with visualizing what a CWL workflow does, what a CWL workflow can look like. And here we go. And so in this case, this workflow is an alignment workflow, which is simply we'll do a mapping of a BAM file to a reference sequence, which does also some intermediary steps such as unzipping the sequence file, then doing BW8 for mapping, doing alignment, and then also doing some indexing in order to create the output reference files. So and again, these are part of the community set of tools that are available from the community to allow you to take a CWL workflow file and then visually represent it, and then also to do some validation and making sure your workflow it makes sense in the case of the directed acyclic graph. Okay. And that is it for my demo and my presentation for today. Thank you all so much. I hope this has been enlightening, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take some at this point.
Thank you very much, Shaikh. That was great. Do we have some questions for Shaikh? You left everybody speechless.
I guess I have a question, just because I know you just attended the CWL conference for some of the sessions. Was it last week or the week before? Mm-hmm. So what are the sort of new hot topics in that community right now?
A lot of it has to do with reproducible sharing of workflows. So the two main things that for me were of interest, there was quite a lot of discussions that are happening in various aspects of implementation of CWL. But for me, the most exciting one was the use of R in order to dynamically generate CWL workflows, so that you can then write CWL workflows in a more object-oriented manner or in a more programmatic manner, so that if you have conditionals or things like that, that's not something you have to manually define in a declarative YAML workflow. You can actually do some programming things like with R, and then that makes life a little bit easier. The other one is the growing adoption of CWL in existing bioinformatics tool sets and workflow orchestrators such as Galaxy, which is increasing their support for CWL, which will allow you to take Galaxy workflows and convert them into, or take CWL workflows and then convert them into Galaxy workflows. Arvados is now supporting them. Overall, the main exciting thing for me was how much the community has grown and how many organizations, institutions, biomedical institutions are adopting the standard itself.
Cool, thanks for that.
Great, well, thank you again, Shaikh. That was fantastic.